Alright, hey everybody. Hi. Why am I here? Why am I here? Shit. Okay, so apparently I haven't filmed my May/and June wrap-up. So I figured that I would rectify that situation today and review every single book I've read from May to June in this video. For those of you who are new and are wondering, what is a wrap-up? It is a thing McKay hates doing. That would be me. Filming a wrap-up and having to give the synopsis of books is equivalent to the sensation of sitting down to take a shit, and while it's halfway outside of you, a hand comes up from the toilet and tries to shove it back in, but you know that shit smears. Alright, so here's what's gonna happen. Rather than me post a video saying May wrap-up, June wrap-up, I'm just gonna fucking combine both videos I filmed into one mega wrap-up and just get this out of the way forever, okay? If you wanna watch this, thank you. If you don't wanna watch this, just, I don't give a shit, honestly. So, without further ado, I'm gonna show you the May books, and then I'm gonna show you the June books, and then we're gonna get the hell out of each other's face. Peace. Bam! Okay, I haven't recorded a video in a week and I've forgotten how. I didn't realize that I never filmed my May wrap-up, which is a shame. That is a shame that I will attempt to rectify today, if I can get this freaking camera to work. This is literally like straight vodka. Let's do this. If I turn red, cheers. If anyone's wondering why I am getting a bit too relaxed, okay, or if I end up a bit, you know, more chill than I normally am, cheers, bitch. Alright, let's actually talk about the books now. The first book I would like to tell you about is the best book I've read all freaking year. I want to find a book that I'm gonna love more than this book because that just is a win for me. But so far, I haven't found that, so let me just talk to you about this amazing work of art, and that is Empire of the Vampire by Jay Kristoff. At this point, I have shown this book so many times. This is literally the mascot of my channel at this point. This is a book that I didn't think I was gonna like, let alone love, because this Jay Kristoff, this man, he has written books that I have DNF'd in the past. I DNF'd the shit out of Illuminae. I was like, what the hell is this? I rage quit Nevernight because I was like, footnotes? Up your ass, okay? So I was like, do I really want to read an 800-page fantasy book by someone that I am not a fan of? I'm so glad I did. Thank you for buddy reading this book with me, Marcy. I love you, okay? It was perfect. It's not only beautiful in terms of story, character, world, literally every aspect of frickin' storytelling. No, it is aesthetically beautiful. This cover, beautiful. This, everything, beautiful. This is a signed copy, by the way. So I just love everything about this book, okay? It's precious. The fact that there's a thing here that says book 1 goes to show that this world is not over yet, so that gives me literal hope in life, which is something I need. I'm not gonna cry. Anyway, so thank you. All right, what else did I read? Interesting question. In no particular order, the next book I read was You've Lost a Lot of Blood by Eric LaRocca, and I am so sad that I didn't love this book because I read this author's previous work. Things have gotten worse since you've last spoke last year. I loved it. It spoke to me. I read it for Summerween. The main thing I loved about that book was how much it spoke to me as a person. So yeah, I love that book. It spoke to me as a person in ways that I just needed in that point in my life. But this one was just not for me. When it comes to horror, stuff like this is just not what I'm looking for. It's a story within a story, and it resembled a David Lynch film, but not one that I could gather any meaning from. I'm sure if some art or literature student read this book, they could write a full-on paper about all the meanings and symbolism and significance. But I just want a story when I read books, honestly, and this just did not do it for me. It was weird and just not in a way that I cared for. Very style over substance, just not my thing. Next book I read is Where the Devil Says Goodnight, and I also went into this book wanting to love it. So I actually have read books by this author before. At the beginning of the year, I was going through a smut phase, and it was a thing. I did enjoy what I read from them at the beginning of the year, and that was The Art of Mutual Pleasure, I think, and Break My Shell. Those two, good stuff. But this book, it's not my thing. It's kind of like a horror smut, but the smut wasn't good, and I wasn't scared. I don't exactly know how long this is because I was given the ebook, thank you to them again, but the audiobook is 11 hours long. There is so much stuff in between the smut that I just did not care for. The connective tissue in between each, you know, scene that I was there for, let's just put it that way, was not interesting. It was pretty weak. I didn't really care all that much about the characters, and overall it just was not it. Thank you for the arc again if y'all are watching this, but I'm sorry. Next book I read was Battle Royale by Koshin Takami. I did a full vlog on this book. Long story short, I gave her 5 stars. She is a masterpiece. I love her. I love the film too. The film was actually my favorite movie as a teenager growing up, and I showed that movie to my friends when I was younger. Everyone thought I was a freak, which I am. Spoiler alert. And reading the book made me realize just how much care was put into this movie when they were adapting this story, because the film is very accurate. And the only times the film isn't accurate to the book is when the film improves on the book, which it does. Shocker. It's okay to say that, okay? It's okay to say that a movie can be better than a book at times. Is the film better than the book overall? No. This is one of the rare cases where one enhances the enjoyment of the other. So if you've read the film, wow. If you have read the fucking film, I mean, it has subtitles, so I'm not entirely wrong, bitch. If you've seen the movie, I do recommend reading the book for a more harsh take on the political, socio-political satire that the film presents. And if you've read the book, I do recommend watching the movie for certain scenes that the film did better than the book. And because the director, the cast, the cinematographer, everyone did a kick-ass job adapting this book, and 10 out of 10, highly recommend, check her out, okay. So next I read Neon Gods by Katie Roberts, and this was a buddy read with my friend Haley. We read the first half together on sprints. She loved it, gave it 5 stars. I was not a fan, okay? I have a lot of problems with this book, namely the fact that everybody was hyping it up as the most dirty, salacious smut. It's voyeuristic. It's a retelling of the story of Hades and Persephone. It's set in the ancient Greeks version of hell. It's smutty. I was like, ooh, okay. A smut book set in the ancient Greeks version of hell. That needs to be a lot, okay? It needs to be a lot more than what was presented here, because this was just bland. I mean, it did get pretty spicy at times, but overall, hetero smut just doesn't appeal to me. And they insisted that these characters were bisexual, but everything was just such heteronormative bliss, and I just found it to be really boring. So if this was a 3-act thing, I would say it was interesting enough for the first act, and the second act was pretty and the third act was full on just very domestic bliss, not at all resembling the filth people made this to look like. But I will read the Achilles, Patroclus, Helen book. Hopefully that's good. Alright, so next I read Better the Devil You Know by Vade Deckard. I was on a live show on Katie Coulson's channel, and I described the opening scene of this book, and everybody was like, send help, what the fuck, shut up. And I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot to issue a trigger warning, oops. This is an extreme horror, gay, serial killer book, and I fucking loved it. Masterpiece, 5 stars, amazing. It's like a gay version of the film The House That Jack Built. If that sounds awesome to you, that is exactly what you're gonna get with this book, and I 10 out of 10 highly recommend it, okay? Next is You've Reached Sam by Dustin Tao. Okay, so the reason I read this book is because I participated in Cindy from Read with Cindy's readathon. Fuck, okay, I'm dying at this point. She hosted a readathon called the Asian Readathon, and this was one of the books I read, and it was not my genre, but also surprising in a good way because I liked its description of grief. It's about this girl whose boyfriend dies, and she and him had had a fight, and there was a lot of things that she wanted to say to him. She blames herself for a lot, and she one day gets a phone call from him from beyond the grave, and the story goes from there. I remember liking the fact that the character was unlikable for a lot of the book, but at the same time, Dustin Tao did make her to be sympathetic, and that really was a very interesting and believable blend, because when you're grieving, when you're depressed, you're not the most, you know, bright person. So the fact that this author acknowledged that we needed more time to get to, you know, warm up to her realistically was really good. and there were scenes that really got me. Like near the end when I'm not gonna say what happens, but the ending scene was legitimately tense. And yeah, I gave this book 3 stars. It wasn't my favorite, obviously, but I'm glad I read it. I get the hype. Alright, next I read Penance by Kanai Minato. This is the follow-up to Confessions. It was fun, I guess. I don't really have much to say about this book. I gave it 3.5 stars. So next, for the Asian Readathon vlog, I read some manga. I read Carnival by Toya Mikanagi. Super fun, super original. I've only read this 1 volume, but the fact that there is a spaceship run by sheep, A+. And then I read Gravitation by Maki Murakami. This is an enemies to lovers story about friendship and music. It matches my background. I enjoyed this one the most, actually, amongst all 3 of these. I love this. I'll most likely continue on with this story because I'm pretty invested at this point, so we'll see what happens. I dug it. Next, I read Absolute Boyfriend by Yu Watase, and the naked. If you wanted to see Chobits, but with a male persicom, that's this book. Make of that what you will. I did not give this a rating because I just did not, okay? That's that. If you want to see the vlog, it's this video. Enjoy. Next, I read and be prepared, brace yourself in for the character development I'm about to exhibit to your face, okay? I read a poetry collection called I Am Not Your Final Girl. This is basically a collection of poems named after certain final girls in horror movies. I certainly did love some of them, but I did not rate this book because I don't read poetry, so I don't really know what makes good poetry, and I don't know what makes bad poetry. I read Milk and Honey last year, and I thought that that was some of the most profound shit ever. And then when I look at reviews of that book, people were like, those are Tumblr quotes, that's not poetry. Those are Instagram captions, bitch. Those are not poetry. And I was just like, ugh. Don't take my word for it, but as a horror fan and as a fan of a lot of these movies, I did enjoy what I read, okay? Moving on. And then after I'm Not Your Final Girl, I read this. Okay. Let me just preface this by saying some things. I do consider myself to be a fan of Sarah J. Maas. I do. Throne of Glass is probably my favorite book series of all time, and A Court of Thorns and Roses is a series I mostly love, okay? I say mostly because I gave the first book 1 star, I gave Frost and Starlight 1 star, and I gave the rest of the series 5 stars, okay? A Court of Silver Flames is a masterpiece, okay? Nesta Archeron, I saw myself in that bitch. I saw myself all the way inside that. That sounds terrible, but I empathized, okay? That was good. That was good. It's like when Sarah J. Maas tries to do something that isn't a traditional fantasy story, it normally sucks. Like with Crescent City, it was like a mystery thing. I don't know if you're like me, if you read thrillers and you don't necessarily like thrillers that resemble mysteries where you have to like be a detective and search for answers and shit. I don't like that shit. So imagine that for 800 pages, bitch. Girl, no, you can't do that to me. And then with ACOTAR, which was a book that didn't read like a traditional fantasy story, but rather read like a straight up romance with fantasy elements, not my thing. But with A Court of Silver Flames, that was another deviation from her normal shtick. It was a very character-driven story, and I didn't think I was gonna love it because I did not like Nesta, and it was also an 800-page giant thing. Love that book, ate it up, wouldn't change a single thing, 5 stars. This book, however, I did a full rant video on this book and do that, okay? Alright, I'm gonna play some show and tell over here. When I was a kid, okay, no, not kid, that sounds terrible. When I was a teenager, I was a huge fan of yaoi manga. So that's basically manga, but it's male-male romance, okay? Now, my favorite one was Junjo Romantica, and I still think this is my favorite. Honestly, I have until volume 12 up in that closet. I have a full set, it's so good, I love it. The anime is also amazing, okay? And I read some yaoi manga. So the first one I read was one with a very interesting title. Okay, the first one I read was one called You Won't Make Me Moan for You. It was not good. It was just a series of like porn vignettes. I'm gonna come close to the camera because I don't want people to hear me when I speak this truth. It was not good, I don't recommend it. The art was good. The whole book is just a series of unconnected vignettes of hot guys fucking, and that's just not fun. I mean, I just don't care, and I gave this 1 star. It was not good. And then I read, excuse me if I mispronounce this, but I couldn't find the English name. It's Hoto Musuko Tokoi no Ana, and I butchered that. I am so sorry. This is basically a student-teacher romance thing, and if you think it's salacious, it's actually not. Okay, they were distant cousins too, but okay, anyway. It was cute. It was set amidst the backdrop of Japan's countryside. Very sunbathed, scenes of nature. It was very cute, very flirty. It wasn't like explicit, and it does get pretty smutty toward the end, but the story before that was a very sweet and cute series of courtship and flirtation, and it was fine. I gave it 3 stars. Okay, so I was like looking on the internet for some taboo stuff because I was like, I want to see what there is in this genre. I want to explore. I want to see how far they're willing to go. And I saw one with the tag incest. This is what it looks like, and the 5-star scale is not equipped for fuckery of this sort, and I literally at this point can't even put in the words to describe what I saw. But let me just put it this way, they go full on Sweet Home Alabama in this manga. I could not get these images out of my head for days. I'm gonna move on now. Anyway, I read another masterpiece this month, that is The Groomer by John Athan. I blogged this book, it was amazing. I loved it. I was gonna read it for June, but I just could not wait, truly. And I did a full blog on this book. I loved it. John Athan is amazing, and I've talked about this book at length, both on my Bookstagram and my blog. So just check those out, okay? I'm getting tired. So next, I'm gonna talk about another masterpiece, amazing extreme horror book I read this month, and that is For the Sake of Two by Judith Sonnet. This is the sequel to Judith's book For the Sake of, which also came out earlier this year, and this woman writes faster than I can read at this point. I know I say this with every single video that I bring her up, but yeah. It's good stuff, and this was a phenomenal sequel. Look, I'm normally pretty skeptical about horror sequels because some of them have been real bad, and I was like, how do you do a sequel to this? Yo, she did everything right, okay? I know I'm gonna be so lazy to put the picture of the vlog on this video later, so just browse my channel, you'll find it eventually. So this sequel is a proper sequel. It is just like a super improvement on the first book, which I was already a huge fan of, so I don't know how she was able to do this. And it was just a legitimately good book. It does have some extremely gory, fucked up kills, which I personally love, we know that. But it wasn't just that. Like, the attention to detail in terms of character, in terms of the backstory of the villains, in terms of story, like there was so much substance, genuine substance to this book that I did not expect. And Judith has grown so much as a writer. I can't believe that the quality of her work has gotten this good in such a short amount of time. Authors like her and John Athan, I don't know how they're able to release so many books and have them all be fucking amazing. Like, what the hell? What the hell what am I doing with my life? Like, seriously. That's all I read this month. My hair is a mess, my life's a mess, I'm a mess.
2,000 years later.
Alrighty, Ruth, so those were the books I read in May. Did you have fun? I fucking didn't. So now I'm gonna tell you about the books I read in June. First one being The House Sitter by Ellery A. Kane. Now, I have spent so much time away from these books because I haven't read them in over a month, so I don't remember specifically what I thought about this. On Goodreads it says I gave it 3 stars, so I can only assume that it was meh. Based on what I remember, this was like a cozy-ish mystery in the sense that nothing of risk happened. No one got fucked in the ass. There wasn't graphic, brutal murder, sadly. But what did happen was, I think this old woman took pity on this younger woman that she saw in a restaurant, and she was like, I know you just got fired, do you want to work in my house instead? And then we find out shit that happens. I don't remember what this freaking book is about. I should look it up, but I don't care. I gave it 3 stars, so it's not worth reliving. I remember it being very meh. I think it was very sanitized, very inoffensive, so lame, and sorry. I do remember finding the central mystery to be quite interesting, but other than that, I just don't really have anything strong to say about this book. So 3 stars, Look it up if you want to read something that is a thing. Anyway, so the next books I read were this manhua, which is a Korean manga slash graphic novel, and this is a series of 8 books and 1 bonus story, which I haven't read yet. So of the main story, I read BJ Alex, and as you can tell by the title, this isn't any normal graphic novel series. No. This one is if you know what I mean. So we follow this guy in college, and he is very introverted, he's very shy, nerdy, a virgin, and because he's very introverted and has trouble making friends and approaching other people, he has no boyfriend, he's single, and because of this, he watches this webcam masturbation show where people like jerk off on webcams for other people's pleasure and shit like that. And this guy that he keeps attending the live show of goes by the name of Alex, and he wears the mask that you see on this cover, and he beats his meat while a bunch of other people are doing the same watching him. And okay, so the main guy in this story falls madly in love with him. He's like, I'm obsessed, I'm in love, I wish Alex was my boyfriend. So one thing leads to another, and he finds out that Alex is actually the student council president. So things get pretty sketchy from there, and Alex obviously isn't the guy's real name, but the guy finds out that it's him, and then they get into this whole conundrum like, don't tell, but I have a crush on you. And then we basically follow them on their slightly enemies to lovers journey as they find out about themselves, and it is very entertaining. Like, this was ridiculously entertaining. I gave this entire series 4 stars. I was never bored. There were so many twists. The story took so many twists and turns. The guy's coworker was probably my favorite character in the whole show, and his whole side thing with who he ends up with is amazing. The art is great. The smut is on point. It is steamy AF. Like, this shit is never not steamy, okay? It is va-va-voom. Period. And I hear that this is mentioned frequently with Killing Stalking and Painter of the Night. I still have not read Painter of the Night, but like, I clearly have a type as far as manhwa goes, okay? Okay, so next I read Auctioned by Cara D because I wanted to dive into taboo slash dark romance, and I was so freaking impressed. It was very pleasantly surprising to learn that this book is actually part of a much bigger series. It's part of a 5-book series, and I read the first 2 books in this series. That would be Auctioned and Stranded. In this series, we follow this guy named Gray. He is kidnapped at the beginning of the book and auctioned off by human traffickers to rich people who want to purchase him and make them his, like, sex slave. And this is set on a yacht in the middle of the ocean, and the man who purchases him has certain intentions, and I'm not gonna say what happens. I think this whole series does count as romance, but I wouldn't call this book a romance. It definitely goes very dark, specifically in the plot regarding human trafficking and what is done to people. Various things happen in this book that are very dark. I gave this book 3.5 stars, but I gave the sequel 5 stars. And without spoiling, I can't tell you why I loved the sequel so much without spoiling the first book, but let me just say the sequel was so fucking beautiful and I had an amazing time. And then I read Berserk Volume 6. This is clearly not Volume 6, this is Volume 3. You know, it's part of like a huge story, so I don't really know if I can rate every individual volume, but it was a fun time. And then I read some more manga. I read Dick Fight Island Volumes 1 and 2. This is one that I DNF'd at the beginning of the year. I was like, what the hell is this? I'm not into this, goodbye. But then yeah, I was going through like a smut phase, so I decided to give it a second chance, and I'm glad I did. I gave the first volume 4 stars, and then I gave the second volume 3 stars, okay? So the first volume follows this group of men who are on this island, and they have to fight in this fighting tournament, and the winner of that tournament is gonna be crowned the new king of all the tribes or something. Honestly, I don't really remember the specifics of the plot, and you really don't go into this manga for the specifics of the plot, and if you do, we are not the same, we are built different, but I have respect for you. Okay, so basically they fight, but in order to win the fight, you need to make your opponent. Do you catch my drift? Do we understand each other? As they say in Den of Vipers, cream. Okay, so then I read this other yaoi manga called Hatsukoi Encounter, and this was absolutely disgusting. I gave it 1 star. The first chapter, oh, it's like, this was just like a shallow, stupid, like, this person's never met a gay person before, and I just did not like this at all. So the story escalates way too quickly. There's no build-up outside of the drilling and pounding. The first chapter is literally just assault, and I just couldn't, just not my thing. But then next I read Saint by Sierra Simone, and this was absolutely fantastic. Have I read the rest of the Priest series by her? No, I have not. I skipped straight to this one because it was male, and I just couldn't be bothered to read hetero priest smut. It was just not my thing. And admittedly, that's kind of what I expected going into this. You know, something smutty, something naughty, something offensive. And that's absolutely not what this was. This was a fantastic novel. This is one of the best books I have read all year. This cover is beautiful, but it misleads the audience. Yes, there are steamy scenes, but this is a beautiful analysis of religious trauma and trauma in general and reconciling who you are with yourself. Second chance romance, unrequited love. We follow this man, I can't remember the guy's name, but the main guy was someone who is in a gay long-term relationship, and then he left his boyfriend to become a monk, you know, to get fulfillment in life because he was missing something. And he learns at the beginning of the book that his boyfriend of a long time is set to get married with this other guy. And he learns this because his boyfriend shows up to the monastery to tell him about the situation, and it just gets so complicated and muddy and things happen, and it was just such a beautiful story. The story takes place in several countries in Europe. I don't want to give away much, but there's just so much tension, there's so much angst. The writing is some of the best I've read all year. I teared up, I was so emotional. I had so many strong and profound feelings about both these characters in an amazing way. I absolutely love this book, and 10 out of 10, highly recommend. 5 stars, fantastic. I will not shut up about this. Every smut recommendation, this is gonna be on. Like, there is no way this is not gonna be on my top 10 best books of the year, because it was so fucking good. And then next, I fell into a pit of sadness. Like, when I say the rest of this month was just 1 stars all the way down, let me start with this one, Without You by Marley Valentine. So I was going through a smut phase, as you can see, and I had been told that this is one of the steamiest books that have ever been written. Oh my gosh, it's so scandalous. It's about a guy who is straight, and his brother is gay, and his gay brother dies, and he hates the brother's boyfriend because the boyfriend stole the brother away from him. So him and the brother's boyfriend need to fucking mourn his brother together, but then feelings, and they talk about their feelings. Fuck this book. The cover of this book makes it look like the steamiest thing in the entire world, but when I say that this is some chicken soup for the teenage soul bullshit, I don't even exaggerate, because that's what this is. There's so much talking about feelings and emotions in a cringe way. I see that the author was trying to go for something serious and discuss various serious things like trauma and grief and first love and shit like that, but it just felt so shallow. Yeah, I mean, I'm not faulting the book for having discussions of this sort instead of giving me the drilling and the pounding, but the discussions just felt so surface level and shallow, and the dialogue was so basic and so cringe, and just the connective tissue in between the smut was terrible. It was horrible. And the smut scenes themselves were horrible. They were like watching teenagers tumble around in the hay. I just did not like anything in this book, so not in any way a recommendation from me. Alright, so then I read, oh boy, y'all knew that this was coming. The House Across the Fucking Lake by Riley Sager. Okay, so I probably should preface this by saying that I did consider myself to be a fan of Riley Sager. His first 4 books, from Final Girls up until Home Before Dark, were books that I absolutely loved and do recommend to my friends to this day. But Survive the Night and this book really made me not want to ever read anything by him ever again, because I just don't know how you can come back from this. Survive the Night was a 1 star. But I did acknowledge that I did have fun reading it, but it was so dumb. And some of y'all might be asking, like, how could you give Den of Vipers 5 stars? That book is so dumb, but give Survive the Night 1 star. Alright, so let me just tell you this, okay? There's a huge difference between these two reactions. First reaction, this is so fucking dumb, man. Second reaction, oh, this is so dumb. Survive the Night was the latter, and yes, it wasn't boring, but I was cringing non-stop left and right at how stupid Charlie was as a protagonist. Now, the thing with House Across the Lake was that it had all the problems and issues I had with Survive the Night, but it was boring. This book was boring. It was horrible. It's one of the most boring books I've ever read. I would not have read it if it wasn't by Riley Sager. And another thing that pissed me off was that certain people who got arcs of this book posted spoiler-free reviews and said, this book has blank elements. It's like, what the actual fuck is wrong with you? I would have been very happy not knowing that about this book. Like, that is a spoiler, okay? Like, when you claim that a book has something that is directly related to the twist that is never countered in the book, that is a fucking spoiler. Do better, BookTube. Okay? Rant over. This book was absolutely terrible. It was boring, the characters were shallow, the writing was cringe, the word bourbon comes out 150 billion times, this woman is an actress, and this is, it's a bunch of boring, flat white people. It's a flat and suspense-free tale of pretty people in peril that embraces everything that Riley Sager has critiqued in the past in other books. I'm not gonna say which ones, because I don't want to spoil, but that's just what's up, okay? If you would like to see my full thoughts on this book, I do recommend just watching this vlog. I get into it. Full spoilers, by the way. I'm actually warning you about the spoilers this time. So the next book I read was another manhua, and this is Wild Wild Wildlife. So I know that yaoi manga is very dubcon, very sketchy at times, but there is a difference between having, you know, a story, like an actual story that stands on its own two legs with dubcon elements sprinkled in, versus a collection of short stories that are just pedo bait and rape scenes. The story opens up with a gang. It is just absolutely one of the most disgusting things I've ever read. And now I'm not opposed to having stories where the R word does happen, but it needs to be, you know, it needs to make sense for the story. This barely qualified as a story. It was literally just scenes of horrible things happening, no plot. There was a story involving prepubescent boy androids. It was disgusting. I gave it 1 star. I don't see any reason for this kind of material to exist other than to whet the appetites of creeps. Quite frankly, it is vile. I gave it 1 star. Don't recommend. Do not go anywhere near this disgusting garbage. And then I read a dark romance, serial killer romance called Unhinged by Onley James. And I did not like this at all either. I gave it 1 star. It was super cringe, super insta-lovey. The writing was horrible. The sex scenes, it's with a serial killer, and the scenes are just so bland and vanilla. It was so bad, to the point that I felt like I was reading a heterosexual smut scene. The way it was written just did not have any appeal to me, and the story that existed around those scenes just felt like someone trying so hard to write something dark but failing because it was just so cringe, you know? It just did not come across as something truly dark, and it just felt like an imitation of a caricature idea of what something dark would be. It was just like fanficky and just not my thing. The whole main thriller plot gets solved super fast at the end, super conveniently, and I just did not, it was just not good, in my opinion. I don't understand the hype of this series, frankly. So yeah, 1 star. Anyway, so that's it for the video. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Share this video with your friends, and I will love you forever. But until then, I hope to see you in future videos, and as always, take care. I lose myself.